Dark clouds hung low over the colony, hiding the tall towers that blocked the sky. The night was quiet, except for the hum of machines and the dripping of dirty water from broken pipes. In the shadows near the waste chute, an alien girl crouched, her body thin and weak. She pulled her ragged cloth tighter around herself, but it was torn and offered little warmth. Her eyes, large and shining in the dim light, searched the ground for scraps. She had been there many nights before, waiting, surviving on whatever was thrown away by the humans above. She thought tonight would be the same. She waited for pieces of food to drop, maybe old bread or spoiled fruit. But instead, a deep, grinding sound echoed through the walls. The waste chute above her rumbled louder than usual. Her heart beat fast as she looked up. She knew that sound. It meant a heavy load was coming. She tried to move away, but she was too slow. With a violent crash, the hatch opened and a flood of garbage poured down. Rotten food, broken metal, wet cloth, and foul-smelling sludge fell over her. She screamed and raised her arms to protect her head, but the weight pushed her to the ground. She coughed, choking on the stench, as she tried to crawl out. The rotten slime stuck to her hair, dripping over her face. The sharp edges of broken glass cut her arms. She gasped, trying to breathe. Her cloth, already weak and thin, tore under the force. She felt cold air on her bare skin. She pulled the remains around herself, but they slipped away, shredded and useless. She was left unclothed, covered in filth, shaking with shame. The voices came quickly. Humans who had been nearby stopped and stared. "Look at her," one shouted, pointing. Laughter followed. Rough voices filled the street. People gathered around, their faces twisted in cruel amusement. They saw an alien girl lying helpless in a pile of garbage, naked and humiliated. Their eyes did not see her pain. They only saw entertainment. "Animals belong in the trash," someone yelled. "Worthless creature," another spat. She pulled her knees to her chest, covering herself as best as she could. Tears burned her eyes, but she bit her lip hard, refusing to let them fall. She had been mocked before, beaten before, but this was worse. They were stripping her of the only thing she had left, her dignity. She wanted to vanish into the ground, to disappear so no one could see her like this. More garbage slid down from the chute, splattering beside her. She trembled, curling tighter, wishing it would stop. The laughter grew louder, crueler. Some even threw stones and scraps at her, adding to her shame. She felt like her chest would break under the weight of humiliation. Then, through the noise, another sound cut through. A voice, calm but firm. "Enough." The laughter died down for a moment. The crowd turned. A man stood at the edge of the circle. He was human, tall, his clothes worn from work. His eyes were not filled with mockery. They were sharp, serious, locked on the trembling alien girl. "What are you doing?" one of the men in the crowd shouted. "She's nothing. Let her rot where she belongs." But the man didn't answer. He stepped forward, brushing past the jeering faces. The girl froze, expecting another insult, maybe a kick. Instead, he took off his jacket. Without a word, he bent down and draped it over her shoulders. The warm cloth covered her shaking body, hiding her shame. Gasps and angry mutters spread through the crowd. "Why protect that thing? He's siding with an alien!" The girl looked up at him, confused. She didn't understand. No one had ever done this before. Her lips trembled as she clutched the jacket tightly, afraid it would be taken away. She could not find the words, but her wide eyes spoke her question. Why? The man didn't speak to her. Instead, he glared at the others. His silence was heavy, more powerful than their laughter. For a moment, the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but then the insults returned, louder this time. "Traitor! She'll drag you down with her!" He ignored them. He reached down, offering his hand to the girl. She hesitated, her body stiff with fear. But there was something in his eyes, something steady, unlike the cold cruelty around them. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, pulling her to her feet. The jacket hung low, shielding her from the stairs. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and began walking, pushing through the angry crowd. Some tried to block his path, but his expression made them step aside. Others shouted threats, but he kept moving, guiding her away from the filth, away from the cruel laughter. The girl stumbled at first, her legs weak, but he did not let her fall. Each step carried her farther from the place of her humiliation. Her chest still burned with shame, but under the jacket she felt something new: safety. Behind them, The crowd continued shouting. Their words echoed through the night, sharp and bitter. But she no longer heard them clearly. All she could feel was the warmth of the jacket against her skin and the human hand holding hers. For the first time in a long time, she was not alone in her pain. Her mind spun with questions she could not ask. Who was this man? Why would he help her when everyone else wanted her to suffer? She clutched the jacket tighter, afraid this moment would vanish, afraid he might leave her too. But he did not stop walking. Step by step, he carried her out of the circle of shame and into the shadows beyond the lights. The street was still loud with angry voices, but his steps were steady. He kept his arm around her shoulders, guiding her away as if the crowd did not exist. The alien girl's body trembled under the weight of stares and insults, but his jacket shielded her, and his hand did not let go. She did not know this human, yet he was the only barrier between her and the cruelty of the world. Some followed, throwing words like stones. "Traitor! Human filth!" they shouted. One man even spat near his boots, but he did not flinch. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. The alien girl pressed closer to his side, confused by the protection. Her people had abandoned her, and the humans had mocked her. Why would one of them act differently? He led her through narrow alleys, where the voices faded into echoes. The smell of rot from the garbage still clung to her, but here the air was calmer. She could hear her own breathing again, shaky and uneven. The man finally slowed down. He glanced over his shoulder to be sure no one had followed, then stopped beside a darkened corner. He turned to her, studying her with eyes that made her nervous, not because of anger, but because they were searching, as if he was trying to understand her. She clutched the jacket tightly, pulling it around her body. She lowered her head, embarrassed by how dirty she was. Mud, grease, and garbage clung to her skin. She thought he would leave her now, disgusted by her filth. Instead, he knelt slightly and spoke softly, his tone calm but firm. She did not understand all the words, but she caught one. Safe. Her heart jumped. She stared at him, wide-eyed, unsure if she had heard right. Could she believe it? Safe? She had never been safe. Not with her own kind, not with strangers, not in the colony. But when he said the word, it did not sound like a lie. A sound behind them made her stiffen. Two humans turned into the alley, faces twisted with suspicion. One pointed at her. "There she is!" The other raised his voice. "The alien freak! Hand her over!" The man stepped in front of her, blocking their view. His shoulders squared, his back firm. The girl crouched behind him, clutching the jacket like a shield. The human sneered. "You're protecting trash. She's not worth the air she breathes," one spat. The man's voice was low, but it cut through the air like steel. "Go." The two laughed, stepping closer. "Or what? You'll fight us for her? You'd throw away your own kind for some alien rat?" The girl squeezed her eyes shut, expecting violence. But when she peeked, the men had stopped. Something in the rescuer's eyes froze them. He did not raise a fist or a weapon, but his stare was unshakable, daring them to move closer. After a tense silence, the men cursed under their breath and backed away. They muttered threats as they left, but they did not dare challenge him. The alley grew quiet again. The girl looked at him with disbelief. He had stood against his own kind for her, a stranger. Her throat tightened as she tried to speak. She whispered a broken word in her language, meaning, "Why?" He did not answer. Instead, he looked at her trembling hands and gently pushed the jacket tighter around her. Her legs felt weak, so when he started walking again, she followed closely, afraid to lose him. They passed through dark streets, slipping deeper into the colony's forgotten side. Rusted pipes dripped water, shadows stretched across cracked walls, and stray lights flickered above. She had walked these places before, always alone, always hunted. But tonight felt different. His footsteps in front of her were steady, guiding her like a path she had never known. At last, he stopped before a heavy door hidden behind stacks of scrap metal. He glanced around carefully, then pulled it open. Warm light spilled from inside, revealing a small workshop filled with tools, wires, and machines. The hum of engines filled the space, mixed with the faint smell of oil. The girl hesitated at the threshold, afraid of stepping into another trap. But the man looked back, his expression calm, his hands still extended. Slowly, she crossed inside. The door shut behind them, shutting out the cold and the echoes of the colony. She stood silently, clutching the jacket, her eyes scanning the strange place. Machines lined the walls, scraps of metal piled high, unfinished devices scattered across a workbench. It was messy, but it was warm, and for the first time she was not outside in the filth. He gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself onto a wooden crate, still tense, ready to run if needed. The man moved around the workshop, pulling out a small container. He placed it before her. Inside was food, real food, not spoiled scraps. Her stomach clenched painfully at the smell. She looked at him, unsure if it was meant for her. He nodded once, urging her. She hesitated. Memories of betrayal filled her mind. Food had been used against her before, yet the hunger was sharp, gnawing at her insides. She reached out slowly, hands shaking, and took a bite. The taste was overwhelming, simple bread but warm and fresh. She almost choked as tears welled in her eyes. She ate quickly, afraid it would vanish, afraid it was a dream. The man said nothing. He only watched, his face calm, as if making sure she would not be disturbed. She tried to speak, to thank him, but the words in his language were broken on her tongue. All she could manage was a whisper in her own, "Thank you." He didn't seem to understand, but he gave a small nod, as if he did. The girl lowered her head, the bread clutched in her hands. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen to protect her, not hurt her. She felt warmth, not just from the food or the jacket, but from something deeper, the strange human sitting across from her who had decided she was worth saving. The workshop was silent, except for the soft humming of old machines. The alien girl sat on the crate, clutching the human's jacket tightly around her thin body. Her hair was still wet with garbage water, strands sticking to her face, but the warmth inside this hidden place was slowly calming her shivers. She glanced at the walls filled with tools and metal scraps, strange devices she could not name, yet everything here felt safer than the streets outside. The human moved quietly, as if used to working in silence. He took out a small cloth, dipped it in water, and handed it to her. She hesitated, unsure what he wanted, but when he pointed gently to her face, she understood. Slowly, she wiped the dirt and filth away, each stroke clearing the shame that had clung to her skin. Her eyes softened. For so long, no one had cared if she was clean, if she was alive, if she was more than trash. Yet here, in this forgotten workshop, someone did. Her stomach growled again, louder this time. She froze, embarrassed, clutching the jacket tighter. The human noticed. Without a word, he pulled another small container from a shelf. He opened it, releasing a faint, warm smell. He placed a piece of bread and a small portion of stew in front of her. The steam rose gently, and her mouth watered. She stared at the food, afraid it was a trick. She had lived through too many cruel games, where people offered kindness only to strike when she reached for it. But his eyes were steady. He didn't push the food toward her, nor did he snatch it away. He simply waited. Slowly, she picked up the bread. She took a tiny bite, then another, then more, until she could not stop herself. She devoured it, tears filling her eyes as the warmth spread inside her chest. She had almost forgotten what real food felt like. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of life returning to her starving body. The human watched, not with pity, but with quiet understanding. When she slowed, wiping her mouth with her sleeve, he finally spoke. She didn't understand most of the words, but his voice was low, calm, not sharp like the voices outside. She caught a word again. Safe. He was telling her this place was safe. She wanted to believe it. But the memories of betrayal were heavy. She stared at him with wide, questioning eyes. Why? Why would he do this? She whispered in her own language, her voice breaking. Why help me? He didn't reply. Instead, he turned to his workbench, picked up a metal sheet, and began to hammer softly, as if to show her he wasn't forcing anything. She was free to stay, free to eat, free to leave. The choice was hers. Her eyes scanned the workshop again. Strange devices, broken tools, piles of scrap. This was his world, a place of survival, not wealth. He was not powerful, not rich, not someone who gained anything by protecting her. That only made his actions more confusing. She hugged the jacket closer, whispering the question again, but this time softer. Why? Her voice echoed in the room, unanswered. But for the first time, the silence did not feel cruel. She stayed still, listening to the sounds of his work, the steady strikes of hammer on metal. The rhythm was calming, like a heartbeat. She realized she did not feel the urge to run. For so many nights, her body had been ready to flee, to hide, to curl up in shadows. But here, sitting across from him, she felt her shoulders relax. It was strange, unfamiliar, almost frightening. A sudden noise outside broke the calm. Heavy boots stomped along the street above the workshop. The girl's breath caught. She recognized the sound. Guards. Her heart raced, and she shot up from the crate, clutching the jacket tighter around her body. Her eyes darted toward the door. They were coming for her. They always did. The human looked up quickly, reading her panic. He moved to the door, placing his hand against it, listening. The muffled voices outside grew louder. They were searching. The girl's knees weakened. She backed into the shadows, crouching behind a pile of scrap metal, her chest rising and falling fast. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. If they found her, they would drag her away again. She closed her eyes, trembling, waiting for the crash of the door. But instead, the human walked to her. He crouched low, meeting her terrified eyes. His voice was firm, steady, as he whispered one word she understood again: hide. He moved the scrap carefully, creating a space for her to slip into. She hesitated, fear choking her, but his gaze told her he meant it. Trust me, his eyes seemed to say. She crawled inside the dark hollow, curling herself into the shadows. He pushed the scrap back, leaving only a thin crack where she could see him. The boots outside grew closer. The guards stopped near the door. They spoke loudly, their voices sharp and cruel. The girl could not understand every word, but she caught pieces. Alien. Missing. Search. Her chest tightened. The human opened the door slightly, stepping out to meet them. She held her breath. If they searched inside, they would find her. If he betrayed her, she would be dragged out, humiliated again. But his voice outside was calm, even bored, as he spoke to the guards. She could hear his tone, casual, like he had nothing to hide. The guards questioned him, their voices rising, demanding. He answered firmly, never showing fear. After a long moment, the sound of boots began to fade. The voices grew distant until the night was quiet again. The girl stayed hidden, frozen in silence. She expected him to pull away the scrap, to shout at her, to reveal her hiding place. But he didn't. Instead, he simply returned to his bench and began working again, as if nothing had happened. The steady sound of hammer on metal returned. Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, she realized he had risked himself for her. He had lied to his own kind to protect her. Her fingers tightened on the jacket. Something inside her chest stirred, something she had not felt in years. Hope. She crawled slowly out from the hiding space. Her voice was soft, broken, almost a whisper. She said a word from her own tongue, one she rarely spoke aloud. Safe. She did not know if he understood, but when he turned and gave the smallest nod, she believed it. The night outside the workshop grew restless. The colony was never silent, but this time the noise carried a different weight. Boots struck the metal ground with heavy rhythm, voices barked orders, and searchlights cut through the alleys. The alien girl sat on the crate, hugging her knees beneath the human's jacket. Her ears twitched at every sound, her eyes wide with fear. She knew this was not random movement. They were looking for her. The human stood near the door. His head tilted slightly as he listened. His jaw was tight, his hand resting on a heavy tool from his bench, a metal rod worn smooth from use. He did not speak, but his body was alert, ready. The girl shifted uneasily, glancing toward the shadows where she had hidden before. She whispered in her own language, a single word that meant coming. He didn't understand the word, but he understood the fear in her voice. The pounding of boots grew louder. The guards were closer now. Their torches sent beams of light sweeping over the broken metal outside. The muffled voices were sharp, full of authority. She recognized one voice. It belonged to the same guard who had once laughed at her when she begged for food. Her stomach twisted at the memory. They would not leave her alive if they found her here. The human turned back to her, his expression calm, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. He lifted one finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Then, he motioned toward the far corner of the workshop, where a tall stack of scrap metal leaned against the wall. He pulled aside a few sheets, revealing a narrow hollow behind them. He gestured firmly for her to go inside. Her heart pounded. She didn't want to be trapped, but his eyes were steady, commanding her trust. Shaking, she crawled into the hollow space. He pushed the metal sheets back into place, leaving only a thin crack where she could see. The jacket clung to her body, and she pulled it tighter, trying to make herself small. The pounding of fists on the workshop door made her flinch. "Open up!" a guard's voice roared. The human did not hesitate. He pulled the door open, letting the harsh light from the torches spill inside. The guards pushed forward, 4 of them, armed with batons and stun rifles. Their faces were hard, their eyes scanning every corner. "We're looking for an alien," the leader said, his voice sharp. "Female, small, filthy. She escaped the waste sector. You've seen her?" The human leaned casually against the doorway, the metal rod still in his hand but lowered at his side. His voice was calm, almost bored. "No aliens here, only scrap and rust. You can look, but you'll find nothing but broken parts." The guards stepped inside without waiting for permission. They began searching, shoving tools aside, kicking at piles of junk. The girl's heart slammed in her chest as the light from their torches flickered closer to her hiding place. Her hands dug into the jacket, and she bit her lip to keep from making a sound. Every second felt like an eternity. One guard moved to the scrap pile, the beam of his torch sliding dangerously close to the crack where she hid. She could see his boots stop just inches away. She closed her eyes, praying to stay invisible. Her breath caught when the guard kicked the pile, causing metal sheets to rattle. For a moment, she thought he would pull them away. But then the human spoke, his tone sharp enough to draw their attention. "Careful with that," he said firmly. "Those are balanced. You knock them over, you'll be buried alive in steel. Not my problem if you don't walk out." The guard hesitated, muttered something under his breath, and stepped back. The pile remained untouched. The leader narrowed his eyes at the human. "You sure you haven't seen her? She's dangerous. Carries disease. Worthless trash that doesn't belong here." The human's gaze hardened. His voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. "If she came this way, I'd have chased her off. Nothing here but my work." For a long moment, silence filled the workshop. The guards studied him, trying to read his face. But he did not flinch. His eyes were cold, unshaken, as though their threats meant nothing. Finally, with a curse, the leader waved his hand. "Come on. She won't last long out here anyway." The boots retreated. The torches moved away. The door slammed shut, leaving the workshop in heavy silence once more. The girl remained frozen in her hiding place, afraid to believe it was over. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her body trembling from holding back her breath. Only when the human returned to the pile and pulled the sheets aside did she move. His hand extended toward her, steady and unhurried. She crawled out, her legs weak, her throat dry. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't stop. She looked at him, confused, overwhelmed. He had risked himself, stood against armed guards, and lied for her. No one had ever done that before. Her lips trembled as she whispered in her own tongue, "Why?" He didn't answer. He only set the metal sheets back in place, making sure the hiding spot was ready again if needed. Then he returned to his bench, picking up his tools as though nothing had happened. The sound of the hammer striking metal filled the silence once more. She watched him, clutching the jacket around her, her tears falling quietly. The shame of the garbage, the laughter of the crowd, the fear of the guards, all of it still burned inside her. But here, in this workshop, with this human standing between her and the world, she felt something she had never felt before. She felt protected. Her eyes stayed on him, studying every movement, every breath, as if trying to understand the mystery of why he cared. And though no answer came, she knew one thing for certain. She could no longer see him as just another human. He was different, and because of him, she was still free. The night did not stay calm for long. The colony guards had not given up. Their voices echoed through the metal alleys, their torches flashed across walls, and the sound of boots grew closer once more. The alien girl's body stiffened with fear as the noise reached the workshop again. She looked at the human, her eyes wide, her hands shaking around the edges of his jacket. He already understood. If they stayed, the guards would return and search again, this time more carefully. The human put down his tools and grabbed a small satchel from the corner. He slung it over his shoulder, then held out his hand to her. His face was serious, but his eyes were steady, telling her without words that she had to trust him. She hesitated, her breath uneven, but then placed her trembling hand in his. Without wasting another moment, he pulled her toward the back exit of the workshop, a hidden door half buried under broken machines. The night air outside was sharp and cold. The hum of the colony seemed louder than ever. Steam hissed from cracked pipes, metal grated under their feet, and the distant sound of alarms pierced the air. The girl tried to keep up, her bare feet stumbling on the rough ground, but the human's grip was firm, never letting her fall behind. Shadows shifted as beams of light swept across the alleys. Guards were everywhere now, searching every corner. The human led her through narrow passages where the walls dripped with oil and rust. He moved quickly, knowing the colony like a maze, turning left and right without hesitation. She followed close, her breath heavy, her heart pounding with every step. Suddenly, a shout rang out behind them. "There! Stop them!" The girl's chest tightened. She looked back and saw two guards, their torches cutting through the darkness, rifles raised. Fear froze her legs, but the human pulled her forward, forcing her to move. They ran, their footsteps echoing loudly in the empty passage. The guards gave chase, their boots slamming against the floor, their shouts bouncing off the metal walls. The path grew narrower, pipes hissing above them. The girl's lungs burned as she tried to keep up. Her legs were weak, her body too frail from hunger, and she stumbled. She fell hard against the ground, scraping her knees. Pain shot through her, and she cried out softly. The guards' voices grew louder. They were closing in. The human turned immediately, kneeling beside her. He didn't yell, didn't leave her. Instead, he grabbed her arm and lifted her to her feet, carrying most of her weight. She clutched his shoulder, her breath ragged, tears blurring her vision. Still, he kept moving, half dragging her down the passage. They reached a broken platform overlooking a deep drop into the lower levels of the colony. The bridge that once connected the path had collapsed long ago, leaving only twisted beams across the gap. The girl froze in terror, staring at the darkness below. It was too far. If they slipped, they would die. The guards' torches appeared behind them. There was no time to think. The human tightened his grip on her hand and stepped onto the narrow beam. The metal creaked under his weight, threatening to break, but he kept his balance. The girl's heart raced. She shook her head, her legs refusing to move. But when the guards shouted again, aiming their rifles, she realized she had no choice. She stepped onto the beam, her bare feet trembling, her body swaying dangerously. Her hand clung to his so tightly it hurt. He led her slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving the path ahead. Every step felt like a lifetime, the abyss below pulling at her. She nearly slipped once, a cry escaping her lips, but he caught her quickly, steadying her. His grip never loosened. Behind them, the guards hesitated. The gap was too wide for all of them to cross safely. They cursed, shouting threats, but their voices grew smaller as the two fugitives reached the other side. The girl stumbled off the beam, collapsing onto solid ground. Her whole body shook from fear and exhaustion. But when she looked back, the guards were still trapped on the other side, their torches flickering uselessly. The human knelt beside her, his face serious but calm. He placed his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her without words. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. She didn't understand how he could stay so steady while she felt like breaking apart. But in that moment, she realized something. He wasn't just guiding her through the colony. He was carrying her hope when she had none left. They continued deeper into the shadows, leaving the guards behind. The passages grew quieter, emptier, filled only with the hiss of steam and the drip of water. The girl leaned against him, too weak to walk on her own, but he did not complain. His arm supported her weight, his steps never slowing. Her thoughts spun as they moved. Why was he doing this? Why risk his life for her? She had nothing to give him, nothing to offer. She was only a burden, a weak creature hunted by everyone. Yet he had fought for her, lied for her, and now he was running with her through the dark. At last, they reached a hidden tunnel, half collapsed and covered in dust. He led her inside, away from the open alleys and the danger above. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to walk close together. The air was damp and heavy, but it was quiet, safe. When they finally stopped, the girl collapsed against the wall, her chest rising and falling fast. She was exhausted, every muscle screaming for rest. The human sat beside her, his own breathing heavy but controlled. He looked at her, his eyes calm even in the dim light. She hugged his jacket tighter, her tears finally spilling. She whispered in her broken voice, mixing her language with his. "Why? Not leave me?" He didn't answer right away. He only looked at her, his silence carrying more weight than words. Finally, he spoke softly, a single word she understood: together. Her breath caught. She repeated the word in her own tongue, tasting it as if it were new. Together. For the first time in her life, she was not running alone. And though fear still haunted her, a small spark of hope grew in her chest as she leaned against him in the darkness. The tunnel was quiet, except for the dripping of water and the sound of their breathing. The alien girl leaned against the wall, her small body trembling from exhaustion. Her legs were bruised, her knees scraped, and her arms still carried marks from the garbage and the chase. Yet, more than the pain, it was the weight of fear that pressed on her chest. She pulled the human's jacket tighter around herself, burying her face in it, as if the fabric could shield her from the memories. The human sat beside her, his eyes watching the tunnel entrance. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his grip on the metal rod he carried was firm. He was ready if anyone came. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, heavy, filled only with the sounds of distant echoes above. Finally, the girl's voice broke through, weak and uncertain. She spoke in her own tongue at first, words tumbling out in a whisper. Her eyes were wet, her lips trembling. She told him about her people, though she didn't know how much he could understand. She spoke of how she was cast aside, treated as less than nothing, how she was left to rot in the waste sector. Her voice cracked as she described the laughter, the stones thrown at her, the times she begged for food and was spat on instead. Her hands shook as she pulled the jacket tighter, hiding her face. Her shame was raw, heavy. She had never told anyone before. What was the point? No one cared. Yet now, sitting beside him in the dark, the words poured out as if her chest could no longer hold them. The human did not interrupt. He did not look away or show disgust. He only listened. His silence was steady, strong, like a wall she could lean on. When she finished, the tunnel grew quiet again. She sat curled, her breathing shaky, her eyes red. She was afraid he would finally turn on her, that he would see her as worthless like the others. But instead, he spoke. His voice was low, steady, the words simple. She didn't understand all of them, but one word stood out clearly. Not anymore. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes wide. Not anymore. Her chest tightened at the sound of it. His tone was final, like a promise carved into stone. He wasn't mocking her pain. He wasn't dismissing it. He was ending it. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now, but they felt different. They weren't only from pain. They were from something new, something she didn't recognize at first. Hope. She clutched the jacket, staring at him as if he were something impossible. No one had ever given her those words before. Not her own people. Not the humans who had laughed at her. No one. Her lips parted, trying to form words, but nothing came. Her throat was too tight. She could only whisper his phrase back in her broken attempt at his language. Not anymore? He gave a small nod. His eyes didn't waver. He meant it. The girl's chest shook as a sob broke free. She covered her mouth, ashamed of her weakness, but the tears kept falling. He didn't move closer, didn't try to stop her. He let her cry, let her release the years of pain that had been locked inside. The sound of her sobs filled the tunnel, echoing softly. It was the sound of a wound finally opening, ready to heal. When her tears finally slowed, she wiped her face with trembling hands. She looked at him again, searching his expression for any sign of regret or doubt. But he was the same, calm, steady, unshaken. He wasn't leaving. She whispered another word in her language, one that meant why. Her eyes begged for an answer. Why her? Why now? Why risk everything? He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached out slowly, not to touch her, but to place his hand on the cold ground between them. It was a gesture, simple but clear. He was showing her she had a place beside him, here in the dark, not alone anymore. Her chest tightened again, but this time not with fear. She reached out hesitantly and placed her hand beside his, her small fingers brushing against the roughness of his skin. The contact was brief, but it was enough. It was an unspoken agreement, fragile but powerful. Above them, the distant sound of guards echoed again, faint but threatening. The girl flinched, but the human did not move. He only adjusted his grip on the metal rod, his face set. She realized then that he would not let them take her. He had already chosen. Her heart beat faster, not only from fear, but from something new, trust. She leaned closer, resting her head against his arm. Her eyes closed. heavy with exhaustion. For the first time in years, she felt her body relax in the presence of another. She felt safe enough to let sleep come. As her breathing slowed, she whispered one more time, testing the words she had learned from him. Together. The human's eyes softened. He didn't reply aloud, but the way he adjusted his arms so her head rested more comfortably was answer enough. The tunnel fell quiet once more, but now the silence felt different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with a fragile bond, with the promise of something she had never known before, belonging. And in the stillness of that forgotten place, the alien girl realized that her life had already changed forever. The silence of the tunnel did not last. Soon, the sound of boots and angry voices filled the air again. The guards were not giving up. Their torches lit the passages, and their shouts bounced off the walls, closer and closer. The alien girl's body tensed. She clutched the human's jacket tighter around her shoulders, her heart beating like a drum. She knew there was no more running. They had followed too far. They had found them. The human rose to his feet, his hand gripping the metal rod. His jaw was firm, his eyes sharp, unshaken. He turned to her, his face calm though danger was closing in. He spoke one word, one she had already learned, stay. She nodded, though her body trembled. She wanted to beg him not to go, not to fight for her, but her voice refused to come. The tunnel shook with heavy steps as the guards stormed closer. Soon, their lights cut through the darkness, revealing their helmets, their rifles, their cruel sneers. The leader stepped forward, his mouth curling into a grin when he saw her. There she is, the rat in the shadows. His rifle lifted. Step aside, human. She's not worth your life. The girl froze, pressing herself against the wall. Shame and fear wrapped around her again like chains. She had seen this look before, this promise of cruelty. She braced for the moment he would step aside, hand her over, and save himself. That was what anyone else would do. That was what always happened. But the human did not move. He stood like a wall, his shoulders squared, his grip on the metal rod tight. His voice was steady, low, but filled with iron. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The guards laughed. Their voices echoed, mocking. You're protecting her? You'll die for trash? The leader sneered, raising his weapon higher. Move, or you'll regret it. Still, he did not step aside. He planted his feet, the dim light catching on his face. There was no fear in his eyes. The girl's breath caught as she watched him. Her heart twisted painfully. No one had ever stood for her before, not once in her entire life. And now, this human, who owed her nothing, was ready to fight an army for her. The guards rushed forward. The tunnel exploded with chaos. Rifles fired, sparks flashing against the walls. The human moved fast, striking with his rod, knocking a weapon from one guard's hands. He slammed another into the wall, his strength raw and unrelenting. The girl covered her ears, curling into herself, but she could not look away. Every blow he took only made him fight harder. A rifle butt struck his shoulder. Another guard hit him in the ribs, but he did not fall. He swung again, his movements fueled by something greater than fear, defiance. The guards shouted angrily, outnumbering him, surrounding him, but still he did not move aside. He fought with everything he had, protecting the space between them. The girl's body shook as tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream for him to stop, to save himself, but her voice broke into sobs. Her hands reached out helplessly, but she could do nothing. She had always been powerless, always trapped in the shadows. But as she watched him stand against them all, she felt something deep inside her change. The fight raged, the human's breath harsh, his body battered, but his eyes never left her. Even as blood streaked his cheek, even as his arm shook with pain, his gaze stayed fixed on her trembling figure. It was as if he was telling her, even without words, I will not let them take you. The guards grew frustrated. He's insane, one shouted, staggering back with a broken nose. The leader raised his weapon, aiming directly at the girl this time. Then she dies first, he roared. Her scream tore through the tunnel, but before the shot could fire, the human lunged. His body crashed into the leader and knocking the rifle aside. The blast echoed, scorching the wall but missing her. The rod came down hard, and the leader fell with a cry, his weapon clattering away. The others hesitated, their courage breaking. One dragged the leader up, cursing, and they began to retreat. This isn't over, they shouted, their boots pounding away, their torches vanishing into the distance. The tunnel fell silent again, except for the sound of the human's ragged breathing. He dropped the rod, his chest heaving. His arms trembled as he leaned against the wall. Sweat and blood dripped down his face, but he was still standing. Slowly he turned toward her. The girl stared at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Her lips parted, but no words came. She stumbled forward, her knees weak, until she reached him. She pressed her small hands against his chest, as if to prove he was still alive, still real. Her voice finally broke free, a whisper choked with emotion. Why? Why for me? He looked down at her, his face tired but calm. He did not answer with long speeches. He simply raised his hand, gently brushing away the dirt and tears on her cheek. His voice was quiet, but the words were clear enough for her to understand. Because you matter. Her knees gave out, and she fell against him, clutching his bloodied shirt. Sobs racked her body, not of shame or fear this time, but of release. She had been nothing, less than nothing, and now someone had given her worth with those simple words. She whispered them back, broken but firm, as if testing their truth. I matter. The human wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her close despite his wounds. She buried her face in him, her tears soaking his chest, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. In the darkness of the tunnel, surrounded by silence and the smell of smoke and dust, the alien girl realized something greater than survival had been given to her. She had found dignity. She had found protection. She had found a reason to believe that she was not worthless. And in the arms of the battered human, she finally felt alive.